Hi, Arika Herron, education reporter at the Winston-Salem Journal, and here with John King, and I'll just let you introduce yourself.
Sure.
Readers.
Okay, great. I'm the former U.S. Secretary of Education and now president of the Education Trust, education advocacy group focused on low-income students and students of color.
Great. I was going to talk to you a little bit about your work as the Education Secretary. You came into that job as having been a teacher, a school administrator, a lot of experience, which is different than the experience that our new education secretary has. Can you just talk a little bit about how that experience kind of informed the job for you and what was important about it?
Sure. Well, I think fundamentally I have always believed in the power of public education to transform lives and the important role of public education in our democracy. School made a huge difference for me as a student growing up, going to New York City public schools. That's why I became a teacher and then a principal. And so, in doing the job of secretary, I was often thinking about, well, what would this policy or issue feel like in schools as a teacher or a principal? And certainly I tried to make sure that as we developed policies and grant programs that we spent a lot of time talking to teachers and principals and parents and students, getting their perspective on issues. So it was a real asset for me. That said, I don't think that the secretary has to have had those experiences. But if one has not had those experiences in public schools, I think it's really important that you spend time visiting with, talking with, getting feedback and input from teachers, principals, school board members, superintendents, students, parents. That work of listening becomes even that much more crucial.
Cool. So you were education secretary when the Obama administration rolled out guidance, Title IX guidance on how to protect and how to address issues around transgender students in public schools. The Trump administration this week has kind of rolled that back. Could you just talk a little bit about that and your thoughts on their decision?
Yeah, I think it was a mistake. I think it was a mistake that they made on the law, as well as, more importantly, a mistake for students. Title IX protects against discrimination on the basis of sex, and we've always understood gender identity to be a part of that. And that was the position of the Education Department even before President Obama came into office. So I think they're wrong on the law to rescind the guidance, but I also think it ignores the very real experience of students in schools. We know that transgender students are at greater risk for committing suicide. We know that transgender students often are victims of bullying, and harassment, and discrimination within school. And so we should be doing everything we can in schools to create safe, supportive environments where students feel respected as human beings, and being able to be treated by other people based on gender identity is a part of that respect that we should have for our students. So my hope is that school districts will do the right thing, protect their students, enforce Title IX. They should know that if they don't enforce Title IX, if they aren't ensuring that students feel safe and supported in school, they are at risk of being sued and of losing, because the law on this is very clear. Students have civil rights and they need to be protected.
So the guidance on transgender students is not the only kind of work that you did that's being rolled back or at risk of being rolled back. The administration is also talking about stepping back from some other work that you did and the Obama administration did in education. Common Core comes to mind. The Trump administration has talked about wanting to get away from Common Core. Talk about what it's like to step away from that work and watch it kind of get peeled back.
Yeah, well, a couple observations. One is, the administration's position in the Obama administration was that all states should have college and career ready standards, and they could decide. For some states that was the Common Core, for other states that was standards that they created within the state or collaboratively with educators from around the country. But whatever approach they took, what mattered to us was that their standards needed to reflect college and career readiness, that we ought to expect when students graduate from high school, they graduate ready for what's next. Now, the Trump administration has talked about undoing the Common Core. Well, that's not the federal role. The federal government doesn't set what the standards are in any given state. And in fact, the federal education law that was passed with bipartisan support that President Obama signed at the end of 2015 requires every state to have college and career-ready standards. But states determine what those standards are. And that's work that continues. If you look around the country, because of investments we made, because of partnerships with states are really making progress on those college and career-ready standards. One of the reasons we have the highest graduation rate from high school we've ever had as a country at 83%. So that progress, I think, is going to continue because educators want to make sure their students graduate ready for what's next. I am worried that the regulations that we worked on, we took public comment on, and we tried to listen carefully to educators. The regulations we worked on for implementing the Every Student Succeeds Act are also vulnerable to being rolled back. And that will be bad for states, it will be bad for schools, and in the end, the risk there is that school districts won't protect students' civil rights. And that's really what the federal role is in education, protecting students' civil rights, making sure that states and districts are attentive to the needs of all students, that they're ensuring that their students aren't losing out on opportunity because of race or because of how much money their parents make or because of what language they speak at home.
I want to ask you about something you just said there, talking about the highest ever graduation rate that we've had. And that's true here in North Carolina too. Our graduation rate's been rising. But at the same time that the graduation rate is improving or going up, there's also lots of students who are getting to college and having to take remedial courses. I'm wondering, what do you think the meaning of a high school diploma is if when students receive that, they're not college and career ready and they need to take these remedial courses?
Yeah, that's why this work on higher standards is so important, because we've got to make sure that when students graduate, they graduate ready. We know that students who are in remedial courses are more likely to drop out of college. They are less likely to graduate from college. So that's a problem we've got to tackle. There are a couple things that I think it's important for communities to think about. One is, if students at the end of 11th grade are not on track to be able to enroll in credit-bearing courses in college, we ought to use the 12th grade to address those needs rather than waiting for students to be in remedial classes in college. And so understanding what student skills are at the end of 11th grade and using 12th grade interventions can be very powerful. We see that around the country, and that's helping students graduate better prepared. But then we also need strong partnerships between high schools and colleges. Bridge programs can be very powerful, where students who maybe don't have all of the skills they need for freshman year might have time in the summer working with high school faculty and college faculty to prepare for the college experience. And that could be academic skills, but then also sometimes it can be skills that are kind of related to academics, study skills, organizational skills. And so making sure that students are ready is critical, and we know that if students are better prepared when they enter, they're much more likely to complete college. And we know there's a huge return on investment for a college degree, but we really need students not just to start, but to finish.
Sure. So you have been a long-time charter school advocate. You were principal for charter schools, is that right? And so a lot of times, especially I've noticed the conversation here in North Carolina, it feels like traditional public school advocates are kind of on the other side of the issue from charter school advocates, school choice advocates. I know that's not your position. What are people missing in that conversation?
Well, a couple things. One is charters mean very different things in different states. So you have some states, like Massachusetts, where I was a principal, they have a very high bar to get a charter. You really have to demonstrate the capacity to build a good school. They have very rigorous oversight of both operations of the school and academic results, and they've been willing to close schools that are low performing. And they've approached growth of charters in a very thoughtful way, trying to be sensitive to resource allocation across schools. You have other states like Michigan, where they just have a proliferation of low-performing, for-profit charters that are not serving students well. That's the wrong way to go about it. So one issue that folks need to think through as they talk about charters is, what's the charter law, what's the charter oversight structure to make sure that charters are doing a good job? Then the second piece is, what's the long-term purpose of charters? And for me, it's two things. It's creating opportunities for students that might not otherwise be available. And two, it's helping to identify innovations that will make all public schools better. I see charters, public charter schools, as a part of improving public education more broadly. We should find good practices, whether they're in charter schools or district schools, and replicate those best practices in all schools. And that's the opportunity, but a lot depends on whether or not charters are well managed and carefully overseen within a state.
How do you suggest removing some of the adversarial relationship that's developed between traditional public schools and public charter schools? I think this money piece, money following students out of a traditional school and into a charter school has created this kind of competition, which hasn't really fostered the sharing of best practices that was kind of the original intention of charter schools. Yeah. How do you get around that?
Yeah, well, a couple things that places are doing around the country. One is very systematic collaboration between teachers in district and charter schools around shared challenges and opportunities. So in New York City, for example, there's an effort to have district teachers and charter teachers learning from each other around what's working to help students improve their academic performance in math, for example, and what's not working. And so that kind of partnership can be built in early in how charters are established and how those relationships are established. The other piece is, what's the set of policies around charters, and are they fair to all schools? So are the enrollment policies fair? If you have a place where charters are not serving English learners, students with disabilities, that's a problem. And oftentimes the reaction of folks in traditional district schools is one of frustration that charters aren't serving a representative population. But that's something that can be addressed through policy. Some states are doing a better job of that than others. We have other states, I think about Louisiana, there was frustration that folks thought charters were expelling students. And traditional district schools, of course, were in a position to do that. What Louisiana ended up doing was centralizing the expulsion process so that the standard for expelling students from a charter school in New Orleans is the same as it would be for any district school. Those kinds of steps, I think, help make everyone feel like, okay, this is a fair system in which all schools are treated in a similar way.
We have time for one more.
Sure.
I'd like to ask you about integration. The district here in Forsyth County did busing for a long time, moved to a neighborhood schools plan, which of course we have segregated neighborhoods in this county, so it's created some segregated schools. You were at Kimberly Park earlier. It's a very racially isolated school. And the district has created a choice plan and where students are able to choose between different schools. They have magnet schools, and they've created standards for technology in classrooms, and so they say all students, it's equitable. All students have access to the same resources, the same courses. Is that enough? And if not, how aggressively should school districts be working towards integration? How important is that?
Yeah, I think it's very important. Look, we're more than 60 years past Brown versus Board of Education, and yet you can still see communities all over the country that are as segregated today as they were even then, more than 60 years ago. And so we've got to tackle that. We know that low-income students, for example, do better academically if they have the opportunity to go to socioeconomically diverse schools, and affluent students at a minimum do no worse and as a result of being in a socioeconomically diverse school, but arguably also do better because they're getting that experience of navigating in a diverse environment, which better prepares them for college and careers. So we should be intentional about it. We tried in the Obama administration to support locally led voluntary efforts to create more diverse schools, and there are smart ways to do it even within a choice model. So as you described, the choice model in the county, there are some places around the country that have a choice model, but there's a weight on ensuring diversity in schools. So they're attending to socioeconomic diversity even as there are choices. So as a result, they have schools that are both socioeconomically diverse but also racially diverse. So there are thoughtful ways to do it. The Century Foundation actually did a great report on 100 communities around the country that are using a variety of strategies to create and maintain diverse schools. But the reality is, for young people today, they are likely to have coworker of a different race, a supervisor who practices a different religion, customer who speaks a different language, and a supplier who's actually a different country. Knowing how to navigate diversity and having that experience of seeing the world from different perspectives will actually better prepare students to be successful in the 21st century.
Great. Former Education Secretary John King, thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Yes.